Hello and welcome to Conversations with the Voice of Reason. I'm your host, Benjamin Boyce, and today's conversant is Alex Radcliffe, who is the host of Board Game Co., which is a YouTube channel focusing on board games. This is part of a little mini-series I'm doing, investigating the board game hobby and the creators that create content around board games. In this conversation, we talk about Alex's life trajectory, his love of games. He's a very business-minded individual, and so the way that he thinks or can speak to how board games operate as a practical product is very enlightening. To understand this particular business and business more broadly, you can find Alex's work linked in the description. Without further ado, here is Alex Radcliffe.
How's life, sir?
Good. How are you doing?
Doing good. Doing good. Life is, busy, but that's always been the case. So it's more about what's different. And
Yeah.
different is, I don't know. I have a cat. That's different. Outside of that, not a ton.
Like, is this a new cat or one of those
New cat.
rescues?
No,
Okay.
new cat, new cat. Yeah, this is I think he's 12 weeks-ish at this point. 12 weeks old. Got him a week and a half ago on the way home from Gen Con, and he's adapting.
We just got one too. Probably just a
Nice.
couple weeks older than yours.
Very nice. Yeah. First cat for you, or?
Squishy. No, long line of cats. We moved
Yeah.
to Eastern Washington and felt like it was the right time to
Cool, cool.
introduce a new
Yeah.
member of the family.
Yeah, I had a cat growing up, but since then have not had one. My kid's been anxiously awaiting a pet for years, and finally happened.
And you landed on cat rather than a capybara because,
Cat versus capybara just seemed like capybaras were less present as a choice. Cat versus dog is because I'm not a dog person. Cat versus rabbit, because my mother has a rabbit, is because I'm not a rabbit person. I think ultimately I'm a cat person. We did actually talk about a fennec fox that was on the list. Apparently, you can have fennec foxes as pets in Ohio, and my daughter was very enthused by that idea.
huh,
And she wanted the cat, but if the cat didn't work out, then fennec fox is our next step.
okay, wow, that's pretty exotic. Or maybe it's not. Maybe they're just around and about.
It's exotic-ish, but yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's exotic-ish. They're not super unheard of, but certainly
yeah,
not a common pet. But my daughter looked up; they are allowed to happen in Ohio. Yeah,
that's fun. That's really fun. Well, thanks a lot for being willing to join me for a show.
absolutely.
Been watching you for a couple of years now. I got into board games because I met a woman. We got married. She has a couple of boys, so I needed some sort of bonding material, and
Nice.
brought over Carcassonne, and it just worked. So then I just started getting into the hobby, and then it kind of took on a life of its own, as it kind of does for some people.
Carcassonne is one of the games that I got into before I got into board games. It was Carcassonne, Catan, Game of Thrones, the board game. I think those the Corridor depends. Like I'm trying to think of like what game or games I had before
Yeah,
finding the hobby. But
yeah,
Carcassonne was one. My brother-in-law introduced it to us years ago, and we all loved it.
yeah. Well, where'd you start like really gaming? Was this in college or after college?
After college, it was 2011, 2011, 2012. Long story short is I won a PlayStation in a local auction. I didn't care about PlayStation because I was a PC gamer, so I sold it on eBay for like 300 bucks or something like that. And this is like PlayStation 4, like this is like when it's first like new and hot and all that way back when.
Yeah, yeah.
And sold it on eBay, and then I don't remember exactly why. Oh no, I remember why. At the time, my brother-in-law, different brother-in-law that introduced us to Carcassonne, but brother-in-law
You
had
got a big family.
yes, lots of extended people, but
Okay.
he had introduced me to Arkham Horror and then Small World and then Stone Age, like all like months apart. But like over
Yeah.
the course of a year, it was like, oh, look at all these interesting games that I'm being introduced that I never heard of. And so when I sold the PlayStation, I used those to go out look into a bunch of Small World and the expansions, and then that started a rabbit hole of finding out what's out there. But I
Yeah.
used the funds to buy my first $300 of board games came from selling a PlayStation.
How did it gradually turn into your life?
So turning into my life wise was it. So okay, so I started by selling that, getting into, fell down the rabbit hole. My initial $300 order was me selecting, tons of games from tons of games more that I wanted. I wanted all the things that were shiny. At the time, I was looking at Cool Stuff Inc. I placed three orders initially: Cool Stuff Inc., Miniature Market, and eBay. And I had smorgasbords of stuff that I wanted, and I just chose those. And so when after the initial order, eventually I'd start buying new ones here and there, starting to try to be balanced, being budget friendly and budget mindful. I found this store called One Eye Jacques that sold things on eBay. They sold Ding and Dent games.
Hmm.
And so you're able to get these like games for like half the price because they were just, had a dented corner. And sometimes it was like really smashed in, other times there was a dent you didn't even notice. They just couldn't sell it as a new game. And so I started doing stuff like that, buying games on the cheap a lot. And then eventually I woke up one day and realized I had 400 games and I had played 100 of them. And that was a lot. And I kind of realized it was a little bit irresponsible, and so I went out and started selling those games. I decided to sell all the games I hadn't played or whatnot, and then
Hmm.
I realized that I actually made money on that because I had bought them all on the cheap and found them like trades and deals and all this stuff. I'd been very conservative in how I bought things, that I actually sold these games and made money. I was like, oh, that was interesting. And then I kind of realized that there might be an opportunity to get games. Like my only purpose at that point was I think I can get games for free by min-maxing the system. I could barter up and work my way around it, and that did work. And my collection started growing. And when I say free, I basically would buy and sell and trade to get games, sell overflow to pay for all the costs of doing this, and then end up with more games than I started with no money out the door. And I had a little spreadsheet. I tracked this all, and then one day, before you knew it, I had like 1,000 games, and I was like, I think this is more than just a collection builder. I
Hmm.
think this is an opportunity to actually build a business, and that's what happened then. That was in 2014, so I got Hobby 2011.
Well, that's pretty
Don't
early.
know. Yeah, I don't know exactly when I started trading. I don't remember that, but I assume it'd be like late 2012. And then in 2014, I realized I had the side hustle for my game collection that turned into a side hustle for business that then in late 2014 or somewhere in that range turned into I need to just like meaning it went from free board games, making money at home, actual business. And the actual business step was in late 2014. I want to say August, but it might have been July, somewhere in that range. I basically drove all my 1,500 games at that point down to a warehouse in Charlotte because I had a friend who owned a warehouse, was into board games as well, and we kind of went into business together and turned this into an actual hobby, an actual business. I mean, so we would buy, sell, and trade games and do that as a business, and that worked well for a long time. I did from
Is this
2014.
Board Game Co?
Board Game Co. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the original origin of the name Board Game Co. Very creative. It was just meant to be SEO friendly and like very accessible. I was almost surprised it was available. Straightforward, to the point, did the job. Did that from 2014 to 2022 before I closed up shop. But 2014 was when I turned into an official business. I stopped making any money in it very quickly because it turns out when you hire people to do all the things you're doing
Mm,
yourself, it turns out that costs money.
yeah.
But we fortunately didn't lose money for the next 4 years. We just didn't make money either. I put a lot of time and effort into it without making a single cent, with the hopeful promise of we're getting closer, we're getting closer, we're on the cusp of making money again. Because I made money when I was in my house with me doing everything, but it was 4 years of not making a cent,
Yeah.
constantly debating whether to quit. And then around 2018 was when we started making money again. And it wasn't a ton. I didn't quit my day job. This was always a side gig, but it was like, okay, now I'm actually being paid for my time. That was 2018. In 2019, I started doing YouTube. I started doing Instagram first. And I dabbled with Instagram. It was fine. I grew to like 500 followers, but I was all do this to promote my business. It was all focused on how to promote Boarding and Co.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
then 2019, I stopped doing Instagram at one point and I started doing YouTube. And YouTube was where I found that I liked it a lot more. Both of them were done for the sake of the business, but
Hmm.
Instagram I didn't have any passion for, and YouTube I did. So if you watch my first few videos on
Why?
the channel, why? I don't know.
Community,
My
the
gut assumption,
length.
my gut assumption is I like talking more than writing. That's my gut
Oh, okay.
assumption.
Yeah.
I think I think
You
when
do
I
have the
write,
gift of gab, if you don't mind me saying.
yeah, and I like writing. I do like writing. I think the problem with writing is with writing takes so much more time to actually do it properly. Like I used to do a weekly newsletter as part of my board game code business to the
Hmm.
audience. And like a segment that I'd write every week is like a game session that I'd had that week. And I'd write the whole thing out. It would either be a game session or a game review. It would be something like, and I always enjoyed that. I enjoyed the process of writing it out. The problem is the amount of time it takes to convey something in writing between double checking, rewriting it, getting
Yeah.
that perfect messaging down. It takes so much more time. And I think I like talking a lot more. And so I think I don't know exactly what it was, but for whatever reason, Instagram was fine. It wasn't bad. It just didn't really get me. Versus YouTube, if you look at my YouTube videos, the first like few videos are all like brought to you by Board Game Co. Buy, sell,
Hmm.
trade your way to better collection. And then I stopped doing that almost immediately because I did it initially as a like business social channel, and then very quickly realized that I just didn't care about that. I just enjoyed talking about board games, which I always knew that. I just didn't realize I would do it on YouTube. And so that's kind of in 2019 that happened. And like, well, 2019 was when I started the channel, but very late. 2020 was when I kind of realized this was turning from my board game co initiative into, well, my board game co initiative, but different goals.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't remember exactly when I woke up one day and realized that I might be able to quit well, put there's different things to quit because I had a day job at the time. I had the side gig, but at some point I realized that I no longer wanted to do the side hustle of Board Game Co, the retail operation. I wanted to do the side hustle of Board Game Co, talk about board games. I don't know exactly when I realized that, but in 2022 is when it happened.
Okay.
2022, I made the leap. I wasn't financially ready to effectively, but I quit my job. I shut down Board Game Co, and I went full time into YouTube. And that's the semi-short version of how I kind of started down this rabbit hole to where I went full time into board games from there. And the
What
story
was
continues
your
onwards, but yeah,
what was your industry while you're doing the day job
I
stuff?
was my day job for my day job from 2014 onwards. I shifted jobs at the same time as I started Board Game Co fully, so both in 2014. But in 2014, I joined an e-commerce agency that effectively they built and developed e-commerce sites. So they worked primarily with a software called Magento. Magento is an e-commerce solution similar to Shopify, but it's more for enterprise sites. It's for like lots of these sites making millions of dollars a year, or tens of millions, hundreds of millions a year. And we basically would make, $300,000 websites for
Yeah.
enterprise level clients who are looking for their websites to be tweaked, ported, managed, revised, whatever it was. And so I was operations for them, worked my way up to a COO. I was COO of the company for the last like 3, 4 years before I left.
Hmm. So you have all this experience on e-commerce and business and mercantilism. I'm wondering, as you know, that experience looking at the board game industry and the community, like what kind of insights you see, like how it gives you a little bit more richer input into not just the hobby, what you like about the gaming, but also the community, how to make money, how people fail at making money, and just seeing it as this kind of niche business that might actually be growing. I don't know what your thoughts are on.
So it's an open-ended thing. So it's a very open-ended question. I'll say a few things. I'll say that it started with from day one, from before my channel was ever popular of any kind. I very much defended businesses, and a big part of that was I've spent a big part of my life working with businesses and knowing how hard it is to actually run a business. And so when somebody else is sitting there losing their mind over their delayed Kickstarter, and I shouldn't say it dismissively, when someone is frustrated with the delayed Kickstarter or
Yeah.
Gamefound or whatever, when someone is upset because they feel ripped off or they feel a company made a choice that doesn't take their interest into account, a lot of times I understand the business decisions that go into that. And this is before we get
Mm.
into specifics, but this means I understand that it's not always as easy as people want. Like I've had
Yeah.
people email me being like, well, Roxy's putting out a new version of Santorini and they're not doing this extra content and they should do an extra scoot to give that content to people because like otherwise like a whole like long messages. And I'm like, I don't think they realize that those decisions are hard. It's not
Yeah.
always easy. It's not always about like when
Trade-offs.
yeah, it's not like we're trying to penalize you into whatever version you have or force you to up purchase whatever it is something else. Sometimes it's just there's only so many SKUs you can manage. There's only so much decisions you can make. There's only some people who will buy something. Very often it's a very loud minority who will buy a product. There's lots of people who will sit there and say we need a standee version, and then they do a standee version, and there's like 14 people who backed it. And now you have to do production runs and checking and all these things for the
Mm.
14 people who backed that standee version. You have to be very careful with how you run a business because the flip side of it is very often people are unhappy with the choices that companies make. And then they're also unhappy when those companies don't deliver the games that they bought. And
Yeah.
sometimes those two things go hand in hand. If a company has to bend over backwards to constantly accommodate the needs of the consumer, they sometimes will have a hard time being profitable, and that's not good for your ability to get your games. And so
Hmm.
I've always been very business minded, while being aware that the customer has reasonable complaints and issues. Well, that's not true. The customer has sometimes has reasonable complaints, sometimes has unreasonable expectations. But most of the time, I would say that customers have a reasonable expectation or frustration, and it's not paired with understanding what's happening on the company side.
Yeah.
I think understanding both those things is very helpful towards a more balanced viewpoint. As far as that's kind of a general way I approach the space just from that business background. Outside of that, I'd say that as far as like trends within the industry or things like that, I don't have anything magical from my e-commerce background. I would say that a lot more of my knowledge within the industry is going to just come from having dealt with used board games for, 8 years. So a lot more of the ins and outs of how where the market is, what people are buying, where people are interested in these big box games, what are they actually playing them? Like I've seen a lot of trends in terms of like the types of things that are super popular and the types of things that don't actually stay in people's collections. So a lot of those kinds of things I've seen.
Yeah,
And then I just have
yeah,
a lot of knowledge of, the way the industry works, but a lot of that's not necessarily from, again, from my e-commerce background. That's just from even things like I'm a regular reader of Jamie Stegmaier's blog. He has
yeah.
constant insights into the board game space, and following not just him but many other creators like him, and you build up a knowledge of how this space operates with its ins and outs.
Well, you are particularly suited to have connections with the audience, with the customer base, but also with designers and publishers because you run a popular YouTube channel.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have inroads with production runs. Have you been able to do tours of China factories and stuff like that?
I'm sure I can get one if I wanted to, but the problem is that would involve traveling to China, which it's a big commitment time-wise to actually do
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
It's something I'm interested in for sure. I mean, and also, honestly, you can even do this in Poland as well, which might be more practical for me because due to
Hmm.
Gamefound, I have reasons to visit Poland. But like, because Poland, Arkin Studios has their factory in Poland, and that's something that I know the people at Arkin. I could probably get a tour there. But I've never actually done tours of those things. I have had a lot of, like you mentioned, like, the inroads to designers and publishers. And so I have had, especially when there's drama in the industry, sometimes you'll have publishers getting ahead of that by trying to connect with people in the industry to get the messaging out there in the right way.
Hmm.
And so I've seen that. You always have to be mindful of that. You have to be mindful as to when are you effectively being a spokesperson for a company,
Oh
and
yeah.
that's not the goal, versus when are you trying to take things in.
And
And
relay. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a complicated balance for sure, but I definitely have gotten the messages on both sides as to some of those nuances or complications. Like one thing
Mhm.
that it it's always fascinating to me, the things that people don't necessarily realize, because something I frequently find happening is with IPs. Whenever you're working with an IP, someone's making a Marvel game or The Witcher or who knows what. There's often a lot of customer requests, and then almost this annoyance and frustration that they're not getting all these requests. And I'm like, I don't know if you understand how many hoops you have to jump through when you're working with an IP.
Yeah.
You can't,
Repurposing art,
yeah, everything has to
music,
be vetted.
but yeah.
So customers frequently want things like, can we get that character? Why can't you change this? I don't like the art there. And you're like, the companies often have their hands tied. They have to go through
Yeah.
so many hoops, and that will also, and even if they could do it, it'll significantly delay the project. So again, it's these ins and outs of kind of seeing all sides of things. And I will say one thing I am always sympathetic to is I think that oftentimes companies don't communicate enough about the reasons they can't do things. And I don't always know why that is. Sometimes it's just they don't want to get into the reasons. If you get into the reasons why you can't hear, that means when you don't have a reason, when it's your own personal thing, then like you start setting this precedent of I have to explain my actions. But I do
Mm.
think sometimes that communication is one of the biggest areas where I'm very sympathetic to the backer side of things,
Yeah.
because I do think a lot of companies can communicate better.
So there's the company, the production side, but then there's the game design and stuff, and that's like the core of this hobby. Is these things called games. What do you have any inroads with designers? Have you ever dabbled in designing yourself? And what do you think
So I've
about that
definitely
possibility space?
I'm friends with a lot of designers. I've dabbled with game design. It's something that I'd love to do down the road, and something that I don't have time for right now. Meaning my process historically has been I sometimes have an idea. I will write out a bunch of notes on that idea. Sometimes it'll be just a bunch of notes. Other times it'll be a full rule set and everything. But then I never go further than that
Mm.
because I love the creative process of, ooh, what if we did an area control game with a dash of deck building here, and then the players cooperatively, like whatever you want to do, like whatever that's a theme based, whether it's a specific mechanic. I love the creative process.
Mm.
But after the creative process comes the work. The work is printing out components, building a TTS mod if you're doing it that way,
Mm.
constantly iterating everything, being prepared to throw out. You could like come up with like 100 cards for your deck or for your game, whatever it is, and have to throw out half of those after the first playtest. There's so much that goes into the iterative process of
Yeah.
creating a game that for me, most of the time, I'm like, I'd rather play someone else's good game
Yeah.
than spend that much time making my game good. Now,
Yeah.
I still have the desire to do so because while the process, I like the creative process, I love the idea of the finished product, there's a section in the middle that I don't want to deal with. And one day I might, when I have more time in my hands. But for right now, I don't have a lot of time in my hands. So
Yeah.
for right now, it's a pipe dream.
Cole Worley is really good at documenting the design process. Jamie
Yep.
Stegmeyer,
Yep.
is probably better at the business side, describing that. I know he does get into mechanics and stuff, but Cole really dives
Completely
deep
agreed.
into
Yeah.
all the different choices, and it's kind of insane how. Well, he's an academic, so it makes sense how much. What's it called when you addend a bunch of writing to something, developer notes or something like that?
Not
There's
sure.
a
Cliff
technical
Notes?
term.
Cliff Notes?
There's a technical term for software design when they do a lot of writing about all the choices, why they did the choices. But it's interesting to see the inside of a game designer's mind like that.
Yeah. But no, Cole Wehrle is a phenomenally talented at what he does.
So there's production, there's running the business. What do you think about the community and how has it changed over the last 10 years? Like what kind of a person is into board games? Because I'm looking at it, there's a lot of different kind of cliques and sects in it. There's not one vector, I
Yeah,
guess, a gamer
there's
gamer.
definitely not one vector. It's very hard to pin down. Like it's one of those. It's a dangerous question to ask. Even well, it's an easy question to ask. It's a dangerous question to answer because you could risk offending all the people who don't fall into that little bubble you painted.
Well, we know that board gamers are not easily offended, so there's that.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Definitely. I think there's a lot of people within this hobby, and the hobby is constantly changing. One of the things that's
Hmm.
fascinating is when you pay attention to crowdfunding campaigns, there's always those games that kind of have a mass appeal and pull in a whole bunch of people who are just very, very different. And so you have like whether it's I don't know, Bear Mountain Camping, whatever it's called, whether it's Botany, you'll have these like huge $1 million campaigns that are pulling in an audience because something about the advertising pulled in a whole new group of people. And those people may well go out and buy new games and get further sucked into the hobby. And so there's huge segments of that. I mean, you go to conventions, and this is why it's so tricky to answer because you'll go to
Hmm.
conventions and you'll see games constantly being sold out that don't have a general awareness or popularity. There's this one company that I want to say Arkan Games. I want to say it's Arkan Games. They make a game called Eschaton. Every board game convention I've gone to for the past 5 years, since I've been going to conventions, they have one booth. They sell this one game. It's called Eschaton. They constantly, I don't know how many copies they're selling, but they seem to frequently have a full booth and they seem to frequently keep going to conventions and selling this one game for the past
Hmm.
5 years. I haven't seen them make another game. Most board gamers you speak to have never heard of this game.
Never
They
heard.
it's just this game that exists that constantly is selling at conventions, and it's not your classic BGG crowd, board game geek crowd that's buying that game. And that's like these kinds of reminders are that there's so many different
Hmm.
types of people in the hobby. There's people who casually go to a board game convention, buy a bunch of fun looking things that a lot of board game geek snobs, I don't mean that meanly, I'm one of them, would never deign to look at. They'd be like, oh, that's rated a 6.2 on Board Game Geek. I'm not touching that. And then they sell
Hmm.
at a convention because you have a little crabs in a bucket game that sounds delightful. There's a lot of different audiences within the space, and we are all very, very different. So, but like I would say there's people who are new to the space. Those are the people who are buying the botanies. There's people who are just into the space in general without being into like, Board Game Geek or crowdfunding. And those are a lot of people who go to conventions. You have the crowdfunding crowd. That's a whole different crowd. The crowdfunding crowd is a whole different segment of people that
Hmm.
are both building and supporting an entire aspect of this industry, which is huge. And within that crowdfunding crowd, there's a segment of people who have unrealistic expectations and are very demanding about what they want. And that's not, if you're a crowdfunding person listening to that, that does not mean you're one of those. But there is a segment within crowdfunding that has an expectation that everything has to be a certain way. And to be
Hmm.
very clear, wanting your game delivered as opposed to not delivered, that's not entitlement. But there's a lot of other things that can go hand in hand. But I just want to be very clear. I think there's
Yeah.
certain reasonable expectations you can have within crowdfunding, and there's times to recognize that a company has to do what a company has to do, and you can't get everything you want.
Yeah.
There's a hardcore BG crowd. There's so many different segments of people that I have a hard time narrowing down a single box because anything
Yeah.
I could use to describe something, I could say like we're all strategic and mindful, and that's not true. That's not true. Some of us are interested in strategy games. Some of us love going to conventions, spending thousands of dollars to be there, and buying party games that a lot of people would never touch. And I don't
Yeah.
mean that dismissively. It's just I don't know how to paint a single bucket around the
Yeah. Yeah.
vast majority of board gamers.
Well, you run a YouTube channel, so you're constantly interacting with your own kind of slice of community. I'm wondering what kind of people that you've found that you've
Oh,
attracted.
so I think in general, most content creators will almost inherently, most content creators will attract people that are similar to themselves. Not exactly, but similar to themselves. That's because those are people that will resonate with what you're saying, your message, how you like things, whatever it is, those people will resonate with you. And obviously, if you're building a persona that's different than yourself, that's an asterisk. If I'm like a hardcore strategy gamer and I've built a persona around party games and look at this, I don't know. People build personas. There are people who build personas.
Yeah.
But for me, one of my favorite compliments I've continued continuously gotten over the years is when people meet me, they'll be like, "Oh, he's exactly like he is on camera." I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. I like being me. I've worked
Hmm.
hard to continue to be me, but so for me, for my audience, they will to a certain extent be similar to myself, both in terms of the games they like, which will lean medium to heavy, a dash of light sprinkled in, sure, lots of found like there's found people who watch my channel, but there's like the interesting segments is because my core gaming tastes are probably medium heavy games of a variety of types, anything from area control to worker placement, Euros, Ameritrash, all of it. But I tend to go from medium heavy with drifting in both directions. But then I
Hmm.
also have kids, so I'll do family games that will resonate with some portion of my audience. And then there's some people
Yeah.
who are like, I'm not here for the kids' games. I'm here because you like Blood Rage. And those are just different conversations. And so I
Yeah.
think my audience generally favors medium heavy games. They generally, these are generalities across the board. They are generally a little bit more mindful as to where their gaming dollar goes, what they're buying, whether they should get it or not. They're generally going to be struggling with the constant desire for new games and how to balance that. I'm just mirroring myself onto these
Yeah.
buckets, but I'm doing so with an awareness of what has happened. So like when I mentioned the family games, I know that I will get less views on a family game video.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I can say confidently that my audience, that while segments of my audience will watch a kids game review, the majority of them aren't. And so like that's
Mhm.
why when I spit out these generalities of myself and how they
Yeah.
mirror the audience, I'm doing so with the awareness of what I'm like and then which videos get views.
Yeah. Yeah. What about what about content creation, specifically board game reviewing? How has that changed how you think about board games or developed your taste? And by having to articulate rather than just enjoy something, probably changes how you relate to the thing, right? I'm
So
wondering how.
not necessarily. There
No?
are changes, but they're not necessarily how I relate to things. And that's I think I think it was always a natural fit for my personality because I like being able to clarify why something is the way it is. I'm somebody that I used to say like I always operate with intent, and an example would be like if you're. I always just give us an example. Like if I'm going to cross the street at some point, I will do so sooner rather than later. Because if I wait till later, then when I'm doing it, there might be a car coming and I will no longer be able to cross. If I do so sooner, if the car's coming, I can still keep walking and not lose time. I can be efficient with my time and then cross whenever. And so
Hmm.
like this is always that's just one random example I gave, but I tend to think through things a lot. When people say there are, like they everything's black and white, I'm like, no, like what was no, not that. What is this thing? What was the thing I used to say? I can't remember what it was, but something about
I
like
think
the
it's
nuance
gray or
aspect of
something.
it's
Yeah.
I like being able to articulate why things are different or why things are the way they are. And that
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you have to have the same opinion. It doesn't mean that there's no complexities to life, but it means that I like I'm somebody who like my community will joke about this here and there. I'll get people being like, like they'll joke that I'll rate anything, including which kids are my favorite. Although I won't do that in YouTube videos because I believe that that stuff lives forever, and I don't need my kids seeing that. But like I believe I can. I like being
But
able
now they know
to,
they live with that in the back of their head. They
yeah.
know that you know.
Well, they also know that I've said publicly it changes day to day. Depends on how things are. But at that moment I can answer the question. And
Hmm.
sometimes people are like, "Well, I can't answer that. They're all my kids." And I'm like, "I can answer that because I can pinpoint different aspects of things at any given moment that makes
Hmm.
something favorable." It's like you could just say everything is like, "Oh, I don't have a favorite flavor of ice cream." Of course you have a favorite flavor of ice cream. You just haven't thought long enough about which one is your favorite. But I like these two a lot. Sure. You don't like them the exact same much. You don't. You
Hmm.
just don't like them. The chances that you like two things the exact same are so minuscule. You just haven't put the effort into thinking which one you like more. And there's ways we can do that. There's exercises we can do that. But none of this matters. But this is to say that I've seen other reviewers comment about how like, oh, well, now that they review games, they're more mindful. Like when they're playing, they're jotting down notes, or they find themselves more analyzing what it is that's happening at the table and why. And for me,
Hmm.
that experience hasn't changed much. I I engage with things and then I can give thoughts on those things. That's always been the case. What has changed is the way I engage with games just due to the volume. Like I used
Oh
to,
yeah.
and this is something I recommend to my audience on a regular basis. Don't play all the new games. You're signing up for a whole lot of mediocre stuff that you're never going to remember or care about. Play
Yeah.
the hotness 2 years after it was the hotness and people still care about it. Don't play the game today that everyone's super excited about. See like Lightning Train from oh my gosh, Direwolf. Lightning Train from Direwolf just came out. It's got a lot of hype and buzz because it's a Direwolf game. I don't know this, but my guess is 2 years from now it's not going to have hype and buzz. versus things like Clank and Dune have had hype and buzz. I
Hmm.
think a lot of times there's hype and buzz that comes out at any given point, and if it still has hype and buzz 2 years from now, great, play it then. If it doesn't, it didn't need to stick around. And so for most people, I recommend engage with the cult of 2 years ago, not the cult of the new.
Yeah.
For myself, I can no longer do that because I review games. I used to do that. I used to like games like Spirit Island, Terraforming Mars, Blood Rage. Some of my favorite games are games that I only picked up years after they were popular. And now I play all those games at the very forefront because I'm creating content and that's when people care about knowing it. So I play a
Hmm.
lot more garbage games, and that does burn me out a little bit on excitement for games. I find it harder to be excited for everything new because I'm constantly engaging with new things and they constantly become forgettable. Not
Yeah.
bad, to be very clear, not bad. They're good games, but good games can be forgettable. A 3.5 out of 5 is a 7 out of 10, which is a totally average good experience. It's good. I'll have fun with it. I just don't care. And so it's changed the way I engage with board games and the excitement I have for new things. But then when I play new things that I like, that excitement is still present. So I'm not burnt out on the hobby, not by a long shot, but even things like crowdfunding. I'm less excited about every new crowdfunding game than I used to be. There's lots of things that go into that. But yeah, I think reviewing games has changed the way I engage, but not the way I think.
Hmm. What do you think? This is almost a dumb question, but what is it about the games that have staying power? What is the quality of a game that 2 years later it's more loved than it was when it came out or a year after it came out?
I mean, everyone's gonna have a different answer. I think that everyone's gonna have a different answer. I
Somebody was
think that
talking about SETI, which is a
yeah.
game about exploring extraterrestrial life, and this got this really big deck of cards. And they said, all these games with tons of cards, they're just going to be around. There's something about that people just love playing these games and
So
replaying the game.
I like games
So,
with decks of cards. I mentioned Blood Rage, Spirit Island, Terraforming Mars. Those all have decks of cards. Absolutely. I love decks of cards because I like variability baked into my games. I like the combination. Like I find there's many games like that specific aspect you mentioned, deck of cards, like things like SETI, things like Lost Winds of Arnak, things like Wayfarers of the South Tigris, Evenfall. There's so many great games out there that just have decks of cards that make it so that there's a core engine at play, but then
mhm.
the way the cards come out and the way you buy those cards or add them to your engine totally changes up the game. So you're constantly exploring new things, and that keeps the game
Yeah,
variable while
yeah.
strategic. I love that. But I don't think that's the only kind of game that sticks. Granted, I'd have to look at what's been doing really well recently to see because I'm thinking of Ark, Nova, and Dune. Those are all decks of cards. I'd have to look at
Mm.
what's been in the top, dozens of games. Lane Sky Team came out recently. That's a game that stuck around. No decks of cards in that one at all. Not a single card. Well, I guess there's some skill cards, but there's not really cards in that game. So there are lots of games that come out that don't have cards. But Dexter cards definitely gives variability to a game. I think for myself as well as for others, but I don't know what portion of others, variability matters. I mean, a great game that plays the same each time you play it often isn't a great game. Or
Hmm.
I don't know if that's true. There's exceptions. For me, most of the time, if the game experience feels the same when I play it, I will be less interested on my fifth play. There are some people who thrive in that level of is developed strategy. People who like games like chess, people who love that abstract concept of like it's all about
Hmm.
min-maxing the game state. There are people who love that. I like discoverability. And so for
Hmm.
me, it's about differences, not evolving the strategy.
Hmm. When did crowdfunding take off? That was probably 2005 when Kickstarter landed. I can't remember the exact date, but
I don't remember exact years. I do know that there are certain key Kickstarters that came out. And this I'm going to use Kickstarter because Gamefound came later.
mhm.
Zombicide is classically one that was a turning point in Kickstarter because it's the first one that really took stretch goals and built out a concept of like, look at all these extra stuff you get as we continue to develop the funding. That was a new concept. I don't know if they were the first one to do stretch goals, but they're certainly the first one to popularize the concept of as we get more, you get more.
Hmm.
And so Zombicide was a key turning point.
Yeah.
Alien Frontiers from Starling Games at the time, I believe, was a key turning point as well. That's another game that it broke records. I think it broke like $100,000, which was insane at the time. Like no one else had broken like $100,000 raising for a board game. That was definitely a key one. I don't know what the turning point was as far as when things started shifting to like this critical mass, but I would guess it was probably around 2010 to 2012 I guess is when maybe a little later than that, maybe a little later, maybe 2012, 2014 is when things really start to take off.
Yeah.
But I guess this will just come down to looking at, tabletop as a portion of funds raised. Just look at that. You can probably look at a
Yeah.
graph year over year and see that acceleration because there definitely has been an acceleration.
Well, it the impact of crowdfunding on the hobby predates your investment in the hobby.
Yes,
So
yes.
the question that I kind of want to ask is, how does that shape, or how has that impacted board gaming, this crowdfunding aspect, from your point of view? Be it the case that you kind of came in a little bit after
Yeah.
that. What do you
I
think
mean, it's
the input
changed.
it has on
The
it?
main benefit of crowdfunding is, in theory, it's about raising money so you can put out a game, but in practice, crowdfunding is very much about awareness. It's about marketing and popularity more so than anything else. The fact that you get the funds up front, that's amazing, but it's a lot of it's the hype. The hype is where is people are paying attention to crowdfunding, and that allows you to have marketing on your game, whether you need the money or not. As far as how it's shifted the hobby, it has done several things, some good, some bad. It has allowed games to be created that could never have been created. Games like Gloomhaven, they don't stand a chance. Like a game like Gloomhaven would never have had a retail presence in the past.
It's a
Nowadays they do.
huge game.
It's a huge
And
game. It's a
probably at
huge
that
game.
time, it was beyond anybody's comprehension, just what is possible in the
Nobody would
space
have
with the
accepted,
amount
no
of content.
retailer would have accepted a game like that on the shelves to take up that much space at
It's
that
literally
price
like
point.
30 pounds or something
Yeah,
like that. It's
yeah.
like huge. It's thick.
And so Gloomhaven as a starting point, and many others that have followed, would not exist in a typical retail supply chain. Now they do because that demand has been recognized, and now you could have oaths won in retail, but you couldn't back in the day. And
Mhm.
so I think that the first thing is it has allowed us to make games that we wouldn't otherwise. It has also shifted the pressure of what a game should look like or feel like. Back in the day, Days of Wonder was considered to be like the cream of the crop as far as production and art. Like, look, a Days of Wonder game would come out, people are like, oh my gosh, that's going to be a pretty amazing looking game. And most companies didn't have that. Most companies have like dry looking games, and Days of
Mhm.
Wonder was considered to be a bar to match. And now Days of Wonder, you look at it and you're like, yeah, that's pretty. So what? Every game's pretty. What do you mean? But that
Yeah.
wasn't the case back then. That wasn't the case that every game was pretty. Days of Wonder was considered to be the top of the top. And now there's so many games that like, look at this beautiful art in the game. Look at this beautiful production. Look at these tokens. Now it's to the point that you have things like Lost Dreams of Arnak comes out with all the tokens, and people are like, wow, look at those tokens. This feels like a crowdfunding game for a retail
Mhm.
production. But like so crowdfunding has shifted the standard of what a game should look like, what it should feel like. It does change the cost of games, but like it's just changed the way we approach
Higher, you
things.
think?
Yeah,
Or
higher, absolutely
yeah.
higher. It's
Okay.
a crowdfunding in general is going to be more expensive than retail, and it changes like just how expensive things can be. But
Yeah.
it allows for establishing demand from the consumer, and it allows for selling direct to the consumer, which removes some of those necessary thresholds. So that's just two different
Mhm.
things. The first is determining, do people even want this $250 experience when nobody would have made a $250 game before. They would have been like, people aren't going to buy that. And now you're like, hey, we're selling this. Do you want it? So people can validate that beforehand. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is some of those $250 experiences wouldn't work because of the margins you need. And by removing the retailer and the distributor, you're able to make a game that has less margins by removing a traditional pipeline. I mean, Shift 30 Games to this day, most of their games rely on direct to the consumer. They have some retailer partnerships, but it's mostly direct to consumer. There are no, for the most part, there's no retailers and no distributors, and so they can operate on thinner margins
Mm.
and make these over top experiences.
Yeah.
So crowdfunding has allowed those two things to happen. Those are the good parts. The bad part is crowdfunding has shifted. I know, like Tom Vassal will go on and on about this, but I agree with him. I just think he's more bothered about it than I am. I'm bothered by it. He's bothered by it. But crowdfunding has shifted where the attention of the consumer is. It's always the cult of the future. It's no longer the
Okay.
cult of the now. It's the cult of the
FOMO.
future. Yeah, it's you're so excited about that game you just backed, and then when it finally shows up, you're not going to play it because now you're excited about the game you're backing today. So that game you backed a year ago that you're really excited about, it shows up, and your thought process and your attention is on the next thing that you don't have, and
Yeah.
so that keeps shifting the bar to that thing you're always excited about is the thing that's not actually on your table. And when it comes to your house and you could put it on the table, you pivot your excitement to the next thing, and that's definitely
Hmm. Yeah.
I hesitate to say unhealthy, but I would say because meaning if you're able to do it and it makes you happy, you do you if you're just doing so responsibly.
Yeah.
But I
But
do
it
think
can shift
instinctively
the attitude of the hobby in general away from discipline and deep enjoyment to more shallow.
it shifts things towards a pursuit of the thing that you will never have because by the time you have it, you're pursuing something else. And
Mhm.
instinctively that feels a little bit not ideal.
Mhm. And then, what's the story with Gamefound? Then, to whatever degree you want to talk about that, because you are now you're interacting with crowdfunding and stuff. I'm wondering, what does it take to get something of that magnitude off the ground, and what are the kind of the challenges for you as a business person or whatever? I don't know your role or anything
Sure.
or what level of NDA you want to maintain, but it's interesting because you are also a businessman beyond
Yeah.
a content creator. So I'm wondering.
So it's a little wide of a question. What's the question exactly? Or closer?
Oh, I don't know your relationship to Gamefound. I don't know to what degree you want that
Sure.
public, but it's
Sure.
interesting because
I'll answer it. Yeah.
you're involved in crowdfunding. So what it's like to be involved in the crowdfunding business? What have
So
you
I'll
learned about
answer
that?
a little, I guess, loosely because the question is a little loose. Feel free to pivot or
Yeah.
focus me a bit more. My role at Gamefound is CMO. I'm Chief Marketing Officer, and my day-to-day job for the most part is talking to creators and trying to get them to use Gamefound. That
Okay.
and
Yeah.
making sure the creators who are using Gamefound are happy. Those are the two main things I do, I'd say. And then a bunch of other side things here and there, but that's the bulk of my role, my responsibility. And as far as what that's like, on my end, my day-to-day is mostly reaching out to creators who, let's say a creator I'm chasing or I'm trying to get.
Yeah. How
So
do you
find a
find
creator.
them then? I guess.
For the most
What do
part,
you do?
it's the board games are a small enough space that there's basically there's two target customers. There's someone who has already done crowdfunding, and then we're trying to get them to do crowdfunding to us. And then there's somebody who hasn't done crowdfunding, and how do you find those people before they even exist, so to speak? And so the vast majority of that is going to be people who are already doing crowdfunding. Crowdfunding is a repeat business opportunity. Your first crowdfunding campaign is usually not going to go crazy. It's not going to raise millions of dollars. It might raise 50,000, it might raise 150,000 if you're really lucky. Like your first campaign is usually not breaking big figures. It's about getting your name known so that people will come back to you next time. And then your second crowdfunding campaign, well, at that point, it's easier to find you because you did the first one. So
Mhm.
finding people who ran crowdfunding is just an issue of literally just going through the database of crowdfunding campaigns, finding the people who haven't used GameFound yet, and then trying to convince them you should be considering GameFound, and then giving them the reasons why. I'm very data driven. I don't seek out people who I don't think will do well on the platform. I
Yeah.
specifically seek out people who I think are going to be happy and keep coming back. And so I just use data to find them, data to convince them, and then some people make the shift, some people don't. There are people that I talk to for like 3 years straight, and then eventually they come over. There's people who still haven't come over, and there's people who pop over day one. There's all kinds of different awareness out there of where GameFound is and what it can do for you. And then the second part, the part that's harder, is finding new people, and that's always a challenge. Being kind of because someone new finding you, that's something that can happen. Someone who's like, I'm going to create a board game. I'll launch it on GameFound. That's easy. That's about getting GameFound's name out there as much as possible so that someone new considers us as a viable option. But us chasing someone who doesn't exist yet it's doable, but it's very hard. It comes down to
Yeah.
being in Facebook groups, being in design communities, seeing that person like post about a thing and then being like, hey, and then trying to figure out if there's a right fit there. So I'd say the vast majority of my time is spent chasing creators who already exist, just because that's a
Mhm.
much easier process.
Yeah. What does it take to make a game? Is all the infrastructure already there? Or
I,
are
I
there
mean,
companies that specialize just in producing whatever idea you
so
have?
there's a lot of things out there to make a game, but the first thing is you need motivation and you need understanding that this is something you're doing out of passion. Because if you're doing it to make money, there are easier ways to make money. It doesn't mean you won't make money. It just means that you shouldn't be pursuing game creation because you view it as a good way to make money. You should be viewing it because it's a passion and it might make money too. But once you have the idea and the motivation, once those things haven't scared you away, it's an issue of trying to find all the right things. And that could be
Yeah.
anything. There are companies at this point, we've entered a time in the space where there are several companies that all they do is they exist to make your life as a designer easier. You're passionate about games, you want to make a game, but you don't want to deal with taxes, you don't want to deal with logistics and all these
Mm.
things. Well, we'll take care of that. I mean, we're going to take a portion of the money, but we'll take care of that for you. And we have all the connections set up. So there's companies like Off Duty Ninja, there's companies like All About Games Consulting or Back Office Games. Like there's a bunch of these companies that the entire point of what they do is they help you bring your idea to life while being able to focus on the creative, and they take care of the rest.
Mhm.
If you do engage with those companies, great. You have a lot of the infrastructure taken care of for you because someone else is taking care of all the other stuff. You're allowed to be your own owner, CEO. You're just hiring a consulting firm to kind of do the rest for you. Alternatively, you have to do the rest for yourself, and that's going to be a lot harder. It's something that might be worth it in the long run. It's always worth being aware of the decisions and the things that tie into what makes a game. But there's a lot. There's a lot of things. You have to first figure out how to make your game as a product. Like, how do you bring your game to life? How do you play test the game? You can't just come up with an idea and then say, okay, great, here's an idea. You have
Hmm.
to build it. You have to play test it. You have
Over
to
and
figure out,
over and over and over again.
join
Yeah.
design communities to figure out what that process is like. You have to establish whether people like the game. And asking a playtester if they like the game is a waste of time. Don't ask the playtester, did you like my game? Ask them, would you pay $80 for this game? Why or why not? Because people like to be nice. And so you have to even learn, like, what is a good exit questionnaire for playtesters look like that will actually help you drive your game forward. And that's all just the process of coming up with an idea. Then from there, it's, you get to production. What does production look like? What kind of card stock are you using? Which factories are you working with? Which factories can you even trust? Like, how do you know which factories
Mm.
deliver? And again, lots of information is out there. You can join these design groups on Facebook, get a lot. You don't have to be the first person beating down this road. You can
Hmm.
follow the steps that others have carved before you. You just have to find those steps. You have to find that path. And again, I would highly recommend either work with a consulting company or join Facebook groups and join the hive mind of people who are often happy to help. But there's so many things that are part of the parcel. Like, have you factored in what taxes are going to look like? Have you factored in what your shipping costs? How do you estimate shipping in a way that you don't, if you tell all your backers it's going to cost you $10 and then it costs you 15, do your margins account for that? You have to do all of this stuff. There's a lot of work that goes into it to making sure you don't go through all these mistakes that others have gone before you that you don't have to if you are aware of them. But
Hmm.
it's all out there, but it's a lot.
Hmm. Yeah, and I'm sure you've seen all the pitfalls just by being involved in all the.
Inevitably, just by backing games, you'll start seeing the pitfalls because you'll see all the things that went wrong. You'll see the person who overpromised. You'll see the person who listened to their community when they said, "No, we want this and this and this is a stretch goal," and they're like, "Okay, great, we'll do it." Now they can't make their game. You'll see the
Hmm.
people who didn't account for the shipping. You'll see the people who messed up with the typos in the production. You'll see the people who had great art but not great graphic design. Those are two different things.
Hmm.
Good graphic design can cover up bad art, but bad graphic design can mess up good art. And like, very often I've seen so many people who focus on good art, but they don't focus on that graphic design. Who is laying out how your entire thing looks? Because your card templates are just as important as that cool art in the background, if not more so. So there's a lot
Hmm.
that goes into it, but just by spending enough time with games, you will find all the ones that have these issues.
What are some designers that you think right now are at the edge of the field, like really pushing things in directions that get you really excited for the possibility space of the art form?
I don't know if I have an easy answer there. Designers that are pushing things forward. I'm trying to think if there's anyone who like typically, uh, what's it called? Peter Hayward. He's someone who's always fascinating. His designs are always interesting.
What's he done?
Lots of he's done like things and rings. He's done
Hmm.
oh my gosh, there's that time traveling like abstract game that time you killed me or whatever it is.
Hmm.
Um, he's done a lot of small things. He works with All Play a lot. He put out fiction, but he's done a lot of quirky. Critter Kitchen. He has a lot of quirky designs that are very interesting because they're quirky. Um, I think I'm not sure if there's a company or a designer that I think of as pushing the envelope. There's always individual designs that come out that feel good, but like a lot of it, when I think of the things that have wowed me this past year, they're not even things that have done something that amazing. It's
Hmm.
just that the particular combination of ingredients really worked well. Sometimes you don't have to add that new, I don't know, spice to your soup. Sometimes you just combine the salt, the pepper, the onion, like
Yeah.
all those things combined perfectly. You're like, oh my gosh, what's the amazing ingredient? Nothing, just the ratios worked well. The ratios all
Hmm.
worked well. These are all ingredients you've seen before, just the
Yeah.
ratios worked well. And sometimes you find out that there's prickly pear in the soup, and that's the secret ingredient. It is different things. Sometimes there's something cool, new things happening. Other times they're just doing other things well. So Peter Hayward is always quirky, so I like his designs because of that. Stan Kodonsky often has interesting approaches. Like, his designs don't typically fall into the same patterns. Like, I've really enjoyed some things he's done, but trying to think through like a super cool new mechanic that I haven't seen recently of any kind. I don't know if I
Hmm.
have that offhand. Oh, I'm Jay Cormier, Off the Page Games. Actually, that's a good one. Jay Cormier and Sen Fung Lim, from Off the Page Games. Their designs are often very, very unique, very well done. I mean, again, lots of well done. I'm just thinking like unique.
Hmm. There's this trope in the board game review space that I just am tired of, but it's across any review space, especially in the realm of games. For some reason, they latched onto this thing called dopamine, and people say it really hits my dopamine. It really hits my dopamine. I feel like that distills whatever it is that we're talking about when we're talking about this thing called fun into just a chemical reaction. I'm wondering, as a reviewer, how have you developed the way in which you convey what enjoyment means to you and what is enjoyable about things.
So it's tricky because I know what I like in games, and I worry the most that I fall into repetition. I don't say dopamine that much, but I fall into repetition because I know what things I like. And so for me, when I'm looking at a game, it's easy to say, oh, well, I love the variable player powers. That was fun. Like I like the variety the game has. I like the hard decisions. Like that time I was drafting those cards or where to place my worker. I like it when a decision is crunchy because I'm like, I could do this or I could do that or that. And those are all interesting. Which one is the most interesting? So I like a tight I like variableness. I like tight decision stuff. I like powers and abilities because they're cool. I like it when a game feels broken but is balanced because games
Hmm.
that are too balanced, that works great, but it doesn't feel cool. Games that are too broken, well, there's strategies that are too broken. Games that everything feels broken, that's like, well, I want this super cool thing that will make me kill all your guys round one, but I also want that super cool thing that will give me 17 points every time I kill a guy. Which one do I
Hmm.
do? Like they're all broken. Which is more broken? So I like powers and abilities. I like a feeling of overpoweredness while maintaining balance, which is hard. I
Hmm.
like variableness. I like accessibility in terms of either playtime or teaching, like a shorter rule book for a meaty game. That's incredible. So like I like good art, good production. Like there's things that I like player interaction. Like player interaction in the game. I enjoy those. So there's a
Like
lot of
what? What's
things.
good player interaction? What does that mean for
So
you?
meaning so have you heard the term multiplayer solitaire?
Yes.
So the more
Hmm.
engaged I am with the decisions you're making, I find the more that game is likely to remain interesting as I play through it. It's not always
Hmm.
a one-to-one. Sometimes you could have games where I'm doing my own thing, you're doing your own thing, and the game remains interesting over several plays. But I do find that if I have to be mindful of what you do and how you do it, that will remain a tighter game and a more interesting game as we continuously keep playing. Because sure, I know that the ideal pathway is getting the wood and then getting the pirate ship and then moving your explorer to Mars. No game does those three things, but whatever. But the
Hmm.
problem is, what if you get the wood first and then I can't get the pirate ship because of that? So I have to pivot to instead getting that rove explorer. Like the knowledge of you getting in the way of my plans means I can't just pursue that optimal strategy
Yeah.
because the optimal
Yeah.
strategy is always
You
iterative
have to
based on
stay
what's
awake
happening.
while you're playing the game. You can't just
Yeah.
dial it in and
And so
snooze out.
variableness
Yeah.
can accomplish that. You and I could never interact, but if some games the pirate ship comes out and other games the spaceship comes out, that also changes the way I push the game. But
Hmm.
the pirate ship being out and me not knowing which one of us is getting it first, that changes the level of pressure. I can't just
Hmm.
min-max everything perfectly. So I do find player interaction keeps me more awake, more engaged, and keeps the experience more variable. But so for me, it's not about dopamine per se, although it does catch a lot of things in there. It's about the fact that I do find that I review enough games that sometimes I feel repetitive. Like, oh, I love this game. It's got player powers and variability, and it played in an hour and a half. Okay,
Hmm.
great. Why? But why was that one a five and the other one was a four?
Yeah.
What about that? What's going there? And
Yeah.
sometimes I do find that sometimes I can't tell you. I can tell you why I enjoy a game. I can tell you why I don't enjoy a game. I can't always tell you why this game made its way to that tier. Like recently, speaking of pirate ships, I love Pirates of Maracaibo recently. I know I can tell you all the ingredients that make me love Pirates of Maracaibo, and I can tell you all the ingredients that make me like Minos Dawn in the Bronze Age. I can't tell you why Minos got a 4.5 out of 5 and Pirates got a 5 out of 5. Something about Pirates was just so good. But
Yeah.
like it's that ratio of like maybe the pepper to salt ratio was a drop better. I know I like pepper, I know I like salt, but like one of those
Yeah.
hit that sweet spot and the other was very, very good.
How do you map out your content creation? How do you keep your channel alive and fresh and
Ooh,
engaging for you and the audience? What's been your
I'll let you know when I
production?
figure it out.
Oh,
Um,
really?
I have the problem is I find that I do a lot of things in life, and I find that the easiest way for me to do a lot of things is schedule and repetition and habits.
Hmm.
If I'm trying to do new things, it is so hard to make that work within my schedule and prioritize it. But I could do a lot on a day-to-day basis that is the same stuff, the same stuff, the same stuff. And so I I am I have a charted schedule for my channel. I know what my week looks like. I know which videos go where. And that all works. It does the job. But one of the things I have struggled with is a desire to mix things up, the desire to make things fresh. But how do you make things fresh? What's a new, like, what do you do? Like, is there a new review format? I've
Mm.
dabbled with that, and I find sometimes people like the old review format. So like I sometimes when I try the new review format, people just want the old one, and I'm like, well, if they want the old one, great. Sometimes I try a new format, people like that, and that's helpful. But there'll always be some people who want the old format. How do you make everyone happy?
Hmm.
Is it a new
Hmm.
style of video entirely? Maybe it's not replacing, maybe it's just adding. So like instead of that review, there's now some sort of like breakdown of like 5 things in dungeon crawlers you don't like or whatever it is. I don't know. And I've done
Hmm.
this. I've come up with new series here and there, some of which show up frequently, some of which show up less frequently. And I try to always have new kinds of videos here and there. But I do find that there's only so much I can do that at the end of the day, at the end of the day, we're talking about board games. Like I can do a top 10 games with top 10 worker placement games, or I could do the 7 most interesting worker placement games. Those are different titles, slightly different
Yeah, yeah,
approaches to
yeah,
the hobby.
yeah,
But like
yeah.
if I'm trying to talk about board games, there's only so much flexibility I have to make things different. And so that
Hmm.
is that has been a challenge for me.
What about games? So like, there's this cult of the new. Everybody wants to find out about, I guess, like Elder Scrolls, Material of
Hmm.
the Second Era. Do I dump $250 on this game? It's really shiny. It's really new. It's beautifully produced, and maybe I'm going to play it 3 times and not want it anymore.
Yeah.
As a board game reviewer, I'm wondering if you have spent time or devote time to reviewing reviews, like looking back and seeing, did this game actually deserve that rating, or did it stay well? Did it change over time? Because I'm wondering, as a consumer, I'm like, oh, this is really nice and shiny and new, but maybe, after a couple years in the hobby, I'm like, you know what? Maybe it's not going to play out. Maybe,
So
well, I
for,
don't know.
for me personally, I have a series on the channel where once a month I look back at where things, what games I covered a year ago and how they fared over time.
Mm.
So I do that already, and I do it a year ago and I do it 5 years ago. It's basically looking back and saying, I love that game. How do I feel about it now? And then I adjust any ratings if I need to. I say if the game got up or if it's still around. I talk about that stuff. But I do think it's an interesting video series to do that on an aggregate basis. Taking a look
Mm.
at the top 10 games from 2022, the top 10 games from 2020, see which ones are still around. I think on an aggregate level, it's actually an interesting video series.
Are there games that have surprised you? You come back to them after forgetting about them for 5 years and they just blow you away because you've developed or you've changed or anything
I
like that?
don't think so. And I'd say that's primarily though because I get rid of games that I'm not playing. If I'm not playing it
Yeah.
for 5 years, sometimes I keep it. Sometimes I just haven't gotten to it and it is what it is. More often than not, those games are going away, so it's harder for them to surprise me. I would say the reverse is true. There are games I come back to 5 years later and my tastes have changed, and I'm like, you know what? I'm not as in love with this as I used to be. That
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
happens more.
In the content creator space within board game reviewers, have you guys ever thought of like doing grudge matches and some kayfabe, maybe just duke it out, big, just drama arcs where you guys tear each other apart and then make up like Hulk Hogan and Roddy Piper or whatever?
I
You
think
guys ever
that
tempted to do
yeah.
that? Like just inject some drama into the community on that level?
I don't think so. I
No.
think that the board game space tends to not love typical YouTube stuff. So
Mm.
like a lot of YouTube things you'll find in different spaces where like anything from collaborations, although people like collaborations, that people like, but a lot of
Yeah.
stuff you'll typically find in the board game space, like people don't want to
Is it
see you
multiplayer solitaire, you
to a certain
think?
extent. I mean, content creation to a certain extent it is just by the nature of
Yeah.
things. But like I think that people aren't interested in seeing you like take your giant game and drop it off a tower, but the same way people might drop a cell phone off reviews. Like it doesn't have that kind of
Yeah.
thing to it. So like most people are here because they want to hear your opinion on board games. It's
Mm.
not an entertainment-based space in the way that many channels are. Many channels are trying to give you entertainment, and so some sort of like grudge match between content creators and all that is entertainment. But most gamers they're looking for information, not entertainment. It's an entertainment-focused industry, but the content you're putting out is informative. And if I sit there and with Tom Vassell, I have a whole like fake grudge match with Tom Vassell, whatever it is, that's more performative
Yeah.
and I think that people don't resonate with it as much.
Mhm. How has board games enhanced your role as a father with your children? What are
Ooh,
some of the
that's always
things
a
that have
tricky one.
brought
So
into your relationship?
it has given me new opportunities to bond with my kids in things that they're excited about. But I think every gamer, myself included, needs to balance not trying to push your hobby onto your kids. So I will play against my kids left, right, and center when they want to. And
Mm.
that's lots of opportunities. My youngest kids like playing with the literal games on the table, like just the pieces, the components, setting up a bunch of miniatures and enjoying that.
Yeah.
All of my kids do enjoy playing board games, different ones, different frequency, different whatever. So for
Mm.
me, anything from the components to the games to even being on videos with me, they've given me new touch points to engage with my children. But a touch point is an opportunity, it's not a pressure point. If you
Mm.
try to get your kids to play games they don't want to, that's not helping anyone. Like nobody wants, I don't know what your child is like, but my father used to want to go on hikes, even though I didn't necessarily always want to go on hikes. And that's not fun. The fun is finding the thing that they want and engaging with
Mm.
that. And
Yeah.
yeah, sometimes in life with friends and with kids, sometimes it's about exposure. Like, hey,
Yeah.
like sometimes maybe a little bit of a push to see if they like something new. That could be warranted. You have to balance. This is true with even foods. Like, I think you'll like this food. Like, try a little bit of chicken. Like, you like turkey, you like this. I know you don't like beef. Try a little bit of chicken. Sometimes it's about trying to figure out what they like. And so there's a delicate balance there. But
Mm.
exploring something to establish if they like it is a very different judgment call than pushing them to play board games because you want to play board games. And so you have to be
Mm.
mindful of that. So I'd say
What's
that,
it like making
yeah.
videos with them? I
Oh, I
like the
love it.
videos that you guys.
Yeah, I love it. They look forward to it. They welcome the opportunity. It's all around. It's I don't push it on them. Generally, what I have found, something I have learned is that they generally are not they generally don't like talking about games they didn't like. Like if they didn't like the game and I put them on
Mm.
camera, like they're super not into it. And I've learned that very
Hmm.
quickly.
Interesting.
Versus like this, and honestly, it's something you see a lot in general board games. Not everyone is interested in talking about the games they didn't like. I want to share the
Yeah.
thing I'm excited about. Versus if they like the game, they love being on camera. They'll be like, oh, can I review it with you? Can I? Can I? And sometimes I'll be like, I already reviewed it. I'm sorry. And then like I always feel bad when that happens, but like, and then I'll find
Mm.
something else they enjoy. But
Mm.
they've liked the process of being telling people how much they enjoyed a thing, which is human. I think it's a human experience to pass
Hmm.
on things we like.
Yeah. Yeah. What's coming up with you on your channel?
Oh, I have no idea. I have no idea. I mean, like dozens of
Nice.
things. Does
That's fun.
For me, the channel is always a bajillion different games at any given point. So like right now, I'm
Yeah.
currently in the process of going through all the games I came back from Gen Con with. There were a lot of
How
the games
many?
that
What
came
was
back,
your haul?
50-ish games.
Oh,
And
jeez.
so well, so it's and
Did
that's
you
like to
pay?
cut
Have to pay
down.
for most of them, or half
No,
of them,
no,
or
most are review copies. I probably
review
played for
copies? Yeah.
maybe 10 of them I probably bought, and then the other 40 or so are review copies. And I said this in the hall. I'm like, do not think that it's normal to come home with 50 games. Some people do so. For me, this is a job. Like I come home with a lot of homework assignments that I enjoy,
Mm.
but
Hmm.
it's definitely like I would not buy 50 games. I would say I bought like 10 of them. Maybe if were getting none of them for free, maybe I would have bought 20 of them. But like you have to be conservative with your money and your time. For myself, a lot of these they come in, they go out. I play them, I review them, I cover them. If I really like them, they stick around. If I think they were good, then they or if they're even not good, I just cover them and they move on. So I would guess from those 50 games, maybe 20 will stay. And then
Hmm.
those 20 would not be a perfect overlap with the 20 I would have bought because we can't know in advance. But
Yeah.
I definitely buy some, but a lot of it's now the reading rule books and trying to play them as fast as possible.
What's your hobby outside of board games? What do you really
Board
enjoy
games,
doing that's not board games? Yeah, you're
board
just
games.
board game on board
This
game on board
I don't
game.
have time for a lot of other things. I'd say that I have found other things that I dabble in, but there's nothing. Board games became my job because it was my hobby, and
Yeah.
that's a dangerous game to play. You can lose out if you do that. For me, it has worked out, but for me, I'd say that the thing I'm passionate about is board games. I also enjoy video games, but not to the same capacity. I play maybe half an hour a day of video games.
Hmm.
I right now I'm obsessed with my cat, but that's because he's new, so like
That's
that'll wear
cute.
off. But like I'm enjoying that extra playtime with him. I think he's adorable. Like I haven't had a pet since I was, I want to say 14, maybe something like that. I don't know. Like I had
Are
lost my
you his
cat.
primary? Is he
Yep,
like latched onto you and
yep,
everybody else
100%,
is kind of really?
100%.
Huh.
Yeah, he likes everyone, but like I'm definitely his go-to when he's overwhelmed. Um,
Yeah.
like a lot of that's just I think just energy. Like I don't like a lot of my kids will run up to him and try to play with him aggressively, and like he likes playing with them, but they don't give him a break. And I know I give him the right amount of space, but it works well.
Yeah.
But so my cat is definitely one thing. I am a big reader. I probably play video games for half an hour a day. I probably read for half an hour a day. Um, Outside of that, it's board games. It's board
What
games
do
all
you
the way down.
read? What are your interests in the
Everything, everything.
really?
My
Yeah.
favorite book of all time is Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett, but I'm reading
I
a
have
lot
the
of different
board game
things.
and my wife has the book. I'm going to read it and then learn how to play the game.
The book is better than the board game, much better.
Okay.
But for me, like I read anything. I read a lot of young adult stuff right now because my daughter is a huge reader and she shares
Hmm.
recommendations with me. So like I'll read a book because she recommended it to me. So I'm currently reading The Hunger Games. Well, I'm currently reading like 7 books. So I'm reading like The Hunger Games right now for the first time. I'm in the middle of there's a not self-help, but there's like a non-fiction book from an author whose name is blanking me that I'm in the middle of right now. Um, I'm middle of what am I middle of? I'm middle of Sabriel. That's an older, again, a young adult book right now. I'm middle of A Court of Thorn and Roses because I've been going through that because everyone loves the whole ACOTAR, so I've been trying that one out. Not super interested in it, honestly. I've read the first book. A bunch of people have said the first book is just the starting point, but like I'm middle of that. I just finished the newest Ken Follett book recently, so like I read a lot and I jump around from series to series. I'm middle of a Dungeon Crawler Carl. Highly recommend that.
What's this
Uh,
dungeon crawler Carl?
Dungeon Crawler Carl. So Dungeon
Okay.
Crawler Carl, it's a new book series, relatively new. It's like 7 of them, but there's relative it's hit off recently. It's taken off. Renegade just signed for making games around it apparently.
Oh.
But Dungeon Crawler Carl, the basic premise in book one is that the Earth is just a breeding ground for like this giant crawler TV show, and a bunch of aliens kind of come to Earth and just destroy everything and turn Earth into a giant 18 floor dungeon that you have to go from floor to floor and try to survive. And so
Hmm.
Carl is one of the people who's making it to the dungeon. You're following his journeys as he like opens loot boxes. His whole life just becomes like this like open loot boxes. You're now doing weapon of +5 damage. Ding ding ding. Like whatever. Like all these like
Hmm.
it's all narrated and it's all this
Gamified. Yeah.
broadcast TV show. It's
Yeah.
super fun. Everyone I know who's read it has thought it was like really entertaining. But yeah, I think it's phenomenal.
I'll have to get
Um,
that for my boys.
but yeah, so like I jump around from book to book. I read a lot of series, and then what I do is I tend to be in middle of one series like let's say Dungeon Crawler Carl's a good example. There's a bunch of them. After I finish book one, I'm gonna jump to another book. Then later I'll go back to book two and then read another book. I jump around a lot, but I read a little bit every day.
Hmm. Wonderful. What's been a father taught you? Core lessons. How to be a dad. Was it come easy to you being a dad?
I don't. I think most things in life, there's a lot of things that come naturally, but naturally doesn't mean you're doing it right. And I think for me, I've
Hmm.
always been a big researcher, whether it's starting my channel, whether it's, buying new gear for my channel, whether it's being a father, whether it's having a cat. I talk to ChatGPT 24/7 about all these things to make sure I'm doing things
Oh,
right. Yeah.
interesting.
I'm a big fan of research, research, research. Don't assume you know how to do things. And so comes naturally is tricky because I think everything comes naturally, just right versus naturally is different. But I will say is I think the biggest takeaway from being a father is that life is more, life is about more than just you. You're responsible for other human beings. You're responsible for how their life goes and how they develop. I think there's a degree of, and I think honestly, even being a pet owner does that to a certain extent, but I think not to the same degree. I think that
Hmm.
if you're like a single individual, I think this tiers. If you're a single individual, life's kind of all about you. If you have a partner, life's about you and your partner. Friends as well. Friends is a lower tier than partner, but like it's still people that you have to be accountable and responsible for. Like, you're making
Hmm.
plans for them. How's it work? A pet is a next step up. I would assume it goes pet then partner, but that honestly depends on the person. Some people would say it's partner then pet, but I don't even mean that in like a funny way. Do you like your pet more than your partner? But I do
Yeah.
think that's an interesting trade-off because partners are more self-sufficient than pets. And so
Hmm.
that accountability of life being more than just about you, it may well be partner than pet, with pet being more of an obligation because that is more, you're more responsible towards their
Hmm.
sustenance and staying alive than you are for a partner. And then kids, I think, are the be all and end all. Like there's
Hmm.
nothing like nothing can trump what the kids need. And need does not mean them stamping the feet saying I want a Xbox. That's not what it needs. But like it means like their actual needs are the most important thing. They have a hard day at school because some kid's picking on them and they don't want to go back to school the next day. Your entire existence is that moment now. Like everything
Hmm.
else is about how do you fix that problem for them? Because it doesn't matter what's happening to you, it's secondary. It is secondary to how you make sure their life is as good as possible. And it doesn't necessarily mean coddling them. I don't want people to hear the wrong thing. I'm not saying coddling them to avoid all the bad things that happen, but the
Hmm.
bad things have to be navigated, and you have to be there for that process to be able to help them grow into the best possible people they can be. So I think it really, having children and pet ownership are really kind of a large conversation about how you are responsible towards
Mm.
the well-being of others in a way that you weren't until now.
Was having children a choice, or
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah, for you,
absolutely.
or was it kind of your destiny? Did you already always knew?
Oh, I don't
No.
know. Okay, I thought you meant accident versus non-accident.
Well,
Um,
yeah, but I
Meaning
mean,
it
as a
was
part of your
I always wanted
life.
kids. I always wanted
Yeah,
kids. Yeah,
yeah.
but it was a choice to always want kids. But had four of them, and I like them all.
Wow, 4 kids and a board game company.
Yep.
Well, Alex, great talking to you. I love talking with content creators in this hobby because there's some sort of excitement, and maybe it's because I'm a little excited about it, but it's just really nice to engage with the excitement of this really strange kind of hobby. I don't know. Do you think it's getting bigger? Do you think it's just it's
I mean,
continually growing? And
the numbers
yeah,
suggest that the hobby is getting bigger.
yeah,
Individual spending, that's a little bit, it goes up and down, and it comes in waves.
hmm,
COVID saw it jump upwards as people rediverted their funding towards something they could actually spend money on, as opposed to you can go to a basketball game, you can go to a movie theater. There was
yeah,
extra discretionary funding, so it made sense that went towards board games. But after COVID, we saw a dip. Now there's different dips, and like all these like tariffs are going to be a new dip. But
yeah. What's up with tariffs? We don't have to get into the nitty gritty, but I'm
I
wondering
mean,
because it's interesting how that issue is impacting this hobby and what it might say about, reshoring. I don't know the grand strategy of macroeconomics, but it must have to introduce stress on the hobby, which provides opportunities,
yeah.
even though it's
It's
providing
a
some
much
pain.
larger conversation to get into, but the short
Yeah.
version is in the short, games are going to be more expensive in the short term. There's no question about that. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, we can have separate debates and conversations. But like
Hmm.
in the short term, games are going to get more expensive, and more expensive games means people buy less games. That's just like
Hmm.
a short term fact. And that's just microeconomics, macroeconomics at its core. More expensive
Yeah.
product means less of that product is purchased. And so board games are going to be there's definitely going to be a small dip. It also introduces economic uncertainty. Now, in crowdfunding, what is your game going to cost? Those are questions.
Hmm.
So uncertainty combined with higher prices means less games will be purchased, but more people are entering the hobby. So it is still a growing hobby, even if individual spending is a little bit less certain to predict.
Hmm. Oh, best game.
Castle Burgundy.
Why?
The why is because it is a game that I have played over 200 times, and that I have no clue exactly how many because
Online
I
or in person?
both.
Both.
Like
Okay.
I'd say at this
Yeah.
point the majority might be online. Like it's hard to say because like
But you
I've
keep
played
coming back
Casa.
to it.
That's the big thing. So the big thing
Yeah.
is, it's one of the first games I ever played, and I will still happily play it. Uh, I'll happily play that game 10 times a year, even after having played it for 13 years. And the
Yeah.
other games that are my number one games, or the other one games that would be number one contenders, don't have that degree of longevity and certainty and repeatability. So, like,
Yeah.
yes, I might love Cthulhu Death May Die, but I've played Cthulhu Death May Die 60 times, and I haven't had it for 13 years. So something about Castle Burgundy constantly keeps me coming back, and
Mm.
that can't be undervalued.
Hmm. Hmm. I have Civolution. I've only played about five or
I need
six
to play that one.
times.
I need to play.
You
I've heard
haven't
good
played it
things.
yet?
Not yet. I
Oh,
haven't,
interesting.
but yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. It takes a lot of headspace to get all these rules into it and then actually perform it.
Yep.
Alex Radcliffe, thank you very much. I'll link to your content down in the description, but where can people go to find you and what are they going to find when they get there?
They can go to YouTube is the best place to find me. So heading over to YouTube, Board Game Co. As far as what you'll find a whole lot of top 10 lists, reviews, crowdfunding coverage, conversations about things happening in the industry. News video goes up every single Saturday, and then dozens of other videos just related to board games. So if you're looking for board game coverage in any number of different ways, I probably have something that might be right for you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your time. Had a lot of fun
Thank you.
talking.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Cheers. There we go. That's the recording, man. Thanks a lot.